When we think of cooking with cheese, we might think of cheese-toasted sandwiches, adding feta to salads, creating a lovely cheese board, or making delicious sweet cheesecakes. But I bet none of you ever thought to add cheese to porridge. And if you did, let me know in the comments. Hey there, cheese historians! I'm Julia, and this is Cheese History, a channel all about the origins, history, and impact of cheese. This is the third part in a series looking at Roman cheese. So far, I've looked at how the Romans made cheese, what some of the types of Roman cheese were like, and where in the empire they made it. If you haven't already, do check those videos out so that what I say in this one makes a little bit more sense. In this episode, it is time to look at how the Romans ate and cooked with cheese. In the next and final episode, I promise, I will cover how cheese was used to treat a whole raft of illnesses and ailments. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, do feel free to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Cheese always begins with milk. And milk is a foodstuff in its own right, but one that was not highly esteemed by the Romans. Milk was considered a food for the poor peasant, as often only in the rural areas did people have access to milk from farms, and so only they drank it. It's not feasible to transport milk to cities, particularly in the warm climates of the Mediterranean, so it wasn't available to most people in cities unless you had your own milk-producing animal. If you did choose to have a private domestic animal for milk, then Pliny might recommend getting a camel. He remarks that camel's milk should be diluted with 3 parts water to make a very pleasant beverage. Pompeia, the second wife of Emperor Nero, used to bathe in donkey milk to keep her skin white and supple, according to Pliny. It took 500 donkeys to produce enough milk for her to do this. That is a lot of donkeys just for a bath. The so-called barbarians in the north beyond the empire were looked down on for all the milk they drank. Milk keeps much longer in cooler northern climes, so it's more appealing as a drink. This is a classic example of Roman snobbery as well, associating milk drinking with poverty and uncultured barbarians. However, they were not above bathing in milk. Pliny has this to say about these barbarous nations. It is a remarkable circumstance that the barbarous nations which subsist on milk have been for so many ages either ignorant of the merits of cheese, or else have totally disregarded it, and yet they understand how to thicken milk, and form therefrom an acrid kind of liquid with a pleasant flavour, as well as a rich butter. This last is the foam of milk, and is of a thicker consistency than the part which is known as the serum. We ought not to omit that butter has certain of the properties of oil, and that it is used for an ointment among all barbarous nations, and among themselves as well for infants. This is an interesting comment, as these barbarous nations, which it's safe to assume are not part of the Roman Empire, are harvesting milk and turning it into butter and some sort of buttermilk, or perhaps sour milk or yogurt. But they aren't turning it into cheese. Strabo makes a similar comment about the Celts of Great Britain. Their manners are in part like those of the Celts, though in part more simple and barbarous, insomuch that some of them, though possessing plenty of milk, have not skill enough to make cheese, and are totally unantiquated with horticulture and other matters of husbandry. There is evidence suggesting that Strabo was wrong here, and that the peoples of Britain were making cheese long before the Romans arrived. So, Pliny is not totally accurate in his comments about the skills of the barbarians. They are often cast as lesser than the Romans, so neither Pliny nor Strabo say anything too positive about them. Basically, they're being snobs. It seems that everybody in Rome ate cheese, fresh, aged, or smoked. It's part of almost every meal. As the Romans had access to all these different types of cheese that I talked about in the previous episode, they're going to need a whole range of different ways to eat it and cook it. Cheese is a very versatile ingredient, And just like there are a million ways to cook with cheese today, the Romans also had many different recipes involving cheese. We don't know very much about the Roman writer Caelius Apicius, but his work, De Re Coquinaria, or On the Subject of Cooking, is a recipe book that gives us further ideas about how the Romans were cooking with cheese. In one recipe, called Melkas, Apicius instructs that cheese sweetened with honey can be served with pepper and fish pickle, or with a serving of salt, olive oil, and coriander. Fish pickle appears to be a mix of fish, wine, vinegar, oil, herbs, and spices, which was eaten as a relish. I can kind of see how the combinations of cheese, honey, fish pickle, salt, pepper, olive oil, and coriander would work, but that would really depend on the type of cheese Apicius has in mind, and he doesn't really give many hints as to what type of cheese that is. Cato the Elder included 9 cake recipes in De Agricultura, some of which were used in ceremonies or as sacrificial offerings in temple worship. The first of these recipes is for a type of sacrificial cake used in religious ceremonies as a sacrificial offering. Recipe for libum. Bray 2 pounds of cheese thoroughly in a mortar. When it is thoroughly macerated, add 1 pound of wheat flour, or if you wish the cake to be more dainty, ½ pound of fine flour, and mix thoroughly with the cheese. Add 1 egg and work the whole well. Pat out a loaf, place on leaves, and bake slowly on a warm hearth under a crock. Many of Cato's cheesecakes are similar to this. Some have a crust, most include honey, some are the same recipe but just cooked in a different way. Cheese is an ingredient in other cakes that were for normal, but perhaps not everyday consumption as well. All of these recipes are for luxury foods. After all, Cato isn't writing to the masses, but to landowners, some of whom could afford the more expensive ingredients required. Another one of Cato's recipes is for Punic porridge. Soak a ½ pound of groats in water until it is quite soft. Pour it into a clean bowl and add 3 pounds of fresh cheese, ½ pound of honey, and 1 egg, and mix the whole thoroughly. Turn into a new pot. Now, Cato's recipe for cake did not sound too bad, but I think I'm gonna pass on adding cheese to porridge. Apicius includes cheese in a sauce called hypotrema. Mix pepper, lovage, dried mint, pine nuts, raisins, dates, sweet cheese, honey vinegar, stock, wine, olive oil, and wine boiled down 1/3 and wine boiled down 1/2. Apicius doesn't mention what dish this sauce goes with, but it looks like quite a sweet sauce with all the dried fruits, honey, and wine. This recipe also makes me wonder what type of cheese sweet cheese was. Once again, it's a real pity that there's a bit not more detail on which cheeses should be used in each of these recipes. The next place in De Re Coquinaria where cheese appears is in 3 recipes for potted salads, which do not have much in common with what we mean by salad today. Instead, they are made of bread soaked in vinegar, chicken liver, cow's milk cheese, cucumber, onions, and dressings that are made of vinegar, herbs, spices, and cheese. They are all chilled before serving, mostly using snow. The simplest of these is called alita sala catabia. Hollow out an Alexandri loaf and soak pieces in vinegar and water. Mix in a mortar pepper, honey, mint, garlic, green coriander, cow's milk cheese seasoned with salt, water and olive oil. Pack in snow and serve. So yeah, not your classic leafy salad. Once again, it's hard to tell what type of cheese Apicius has in mind here, other than cow's milk cheese. By far the most extravagant dish with cheese in De Re Coquinaria is patinam ex lacte. Steep nuts and dry them. Make sure you have fresh prepared sea urchins on hand. Take a dish, and in it put the ingredients written below in the casserole dish one by one.
mallows and beetroots, ripe leeks, celery, freshly boiled greens and vegetable puree, chicken pieces cooked in their own juices, boiled brains, Lucanian sausages, hard-boiled eggs cut in half. Next, add pork sausages made with Tarentine sauce that have been cooked and sliced, chicken livers, fillets of fried codfish, sea nettles, pieces of oyster meat and fresh cheese. Arrange these ingredients in layers, then sprinkle each with small nuts and peppercorns. The sauce to be poured over the dish is made of these ingredients: pepper, lovage, celery seed, and silphium. Blend these seasonings and heat. After cooking, strain milk and into it mix raw eggs so that the sauce has a smooth texture. Pour it over the casserole. Cook. When it is cooked, set the fresh sea urchin on top. Sprinkle with pepper and serve.
There is so much going on in that casserole that it's really hard to have an idea of how it would turn out. I mean, there are 7 different types of meat, as many different types of vegetables, and some kind of fresh cheese, all of which is covered in a herby milk sauce. Now, these recipes are just a handful of the ways the Romans would have cooked with and eaten cheese. Very few recipe books have survived from the Roman period, so it's safe to assume that they would have had a whole heap of other recipes using cheese that we just don't know about. Based on the ingredients in many of these recipes, they are foods of the wealthy who can afford spices and other exotic ingredients. The less well-off people would have had their own unique ways of cooking and eating cheese, as would the various cultures absorbed into the Roman Empire as it expanded. For the Romans, cheese wasn't just a good food to eat. They used milk and cheese to maintain their health and to cure all manner of illnesses and ailments. And that is what I will be looking at in the next episode in this exploration of cheese in ancient Rome. So make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss out. Feel free to share this video with anyone you think might be interested in cheese history, and let me know in the comments what your favourite way to eat cheese is. And I will see you next time.